achieved.
So I want to talk about three fighters specifically. The first being Alexander Gustafsson, who recently, at least temporarily, retired after his loss to Anthony Smith. And I get it. Gus has had one of those careers it's very difficult to, as an individual who wants to aspire to be the best he possibly can be, considering he lost multiple title fights. To John Jones twice, DC once. He lost twice to Rumble, and Anthony Smith, both in Sweden. I believe the Johnson loss was in Sweden as well. Both getting finished. I can understand where a guy like him would say, hey, look, it's time to call it a career. But now he says he's getting tingles in his hands. He wants to come back to compete. I applaud him for that. You know what? I've heard guys say that, I believe Steve Eiserman said, you have the rest of your life to be retired. So you even have one iota of willingness to continue to compete, whatever sport or thing is you're doing, or whatever occupation you're doing. Keep doing it until you're finished. Keep doing it until you absolutely do not want to do it anymore. So if Gus wants to come back, absolutely, let him do it. Maybe Alexander Gustafsson would be better suited to put some weight on and go up to heavyweight and see how he does there. I don't know. But I think the light heavyweight division is still a very fun division with a lot of interesting fights. But either way, I'm actually hoping Gus comes back and competes. The second fight I want to talk about is Ben Askren. Ben Askren suffering a brutal 5-second knockout, fastest knockout in the history of the UFC at the hands of Jorge Masvidal. I'd like to say I did pick Jorge straight up. I took Jorge to win that fight. I said it could be by knockout. I thought it might have been by decision. In no way, shape, or form did I anticipate him knocking him out in such dramatic fashion, but it was still very impressive. And I felt, I guess my analysis of the fight you could see a little bit of what happened there, where Askren is simply willing to move forward unabated and unconcerned about the offense coming back to initiate a close quarter exchange that allows him to set up his wrestling. That's what he was going for. That's what Masvidal anticipated, and we went from there. Very easily, we've seen it before. He could have missed that. Askren could have got a hold of him, put him on the mat, and dominated the first round and took the fight over from there. So you never know. A lot of people, though, claiming that Askren is over the hill or was never that big of a deal, as a wash-up, as a hype train, whatever. Again, it's crazy how a fighter can win, in his case, 18, 19, 20 fights, start his career, lose one, and he's done. Yes, it was an emphatic defeat, but hey, it is what it is. I think he'll be back. He'd be foolish not to come back. There's lots of fights out there that are winnable. That a rematch with Masvidal at some point down the line could be winnable. I don't anticipate it happening, but you never know. But yeah, it certainly hurts him a little bit. But again, it's a sport. Losses are going to happen, and people grow from them. A lot of big fighters say, you're not a true competitor until you lose that first fight and come back from it stronger. So that'll be very telling for Askren next time we see him. Now, the final fighter I want to talk about is John Jones. John Jones coming off of a victory over Thiago Santos, a split decision. Some people claim it shouldn't have been split. It should have been unanimous in favor of Jones. Other people saying Santos got robbed. I feel it was very close. I did not have any problem with the split decision. Had Santos emerged with the title, I wouldn't have been upset about it. I could have definitely argued a case for Jones. But it is what it is. Jones has not dominated his last two opponents. I got caught up expecting Jones to finish him. He did not finish him. Again, both guys were warriors, suffered injuries throughout, and had to spend some time in a wheelchair in the not too distant time after the fight. But either way, Jones is fighting top level competition. Same thing was said with GSP. He's not finishing guys. Again, he's fighting the elite of the elite in one night after the next. He's fighting the top guys, super dangerous guys, and his way of life and his lifestyle and his success can be gone with one failed shot, with one flying knee, or any number of things that could go wrong in a fight that could ultimately cost him his title. So he has to be very careful. He has to be cautious, and he has to fight to the best of his abilities, but at the same time not risking too much. So while it wasn't a dominant performance like everyone expected it to be, and again, people say when you're watching a champion not dominate an opponent, a lot of people will mistake that for losing the fight. That's not always the case. But either way, I look forward to seeing what John Jones does next out. The light heavyweight division is very interesting. A rematch with Santos down the road would not be out of the question. Maybe even in Brazil, that'd be very, very cool. And now with guys like Dominic Reyes and Alexander Rakic and Johnny Walker all lining up, we could see a number of new competitors fighting John Jones for the title in the not-too-distant future. But welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 155, which will take place on July 13th from the Golden One Center in Sacramento, California. I'll be giving you my predictions for the 5 main card fights. We did lose one main card fight, and as of right now, they have not bumped anybody up to the main card. So if there's a main card fight added to put it to 6, that fight will be in my prelim breakdown as well, which you'll be able to find at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm coming off a bet pack where it didn't do awesome. I did pick up some nice wins. I had a chance, Rencourt, to Rencontre, I can't pronounce his name properly, it's struggling with that, to win, and he pulled off a huge win. He was, a plus 400 underdog. I had Masvidal as well. I had some nice wins. I just didn't get either of my gold picks right. I had Jones to finish in one, and I had Rockhold in the other straight up, and neither one of those were able to win. Their counterparts, Arnold Allen by decision, and I can't remember what the other one was, did come through, so it wasn't our night. It was a tough night of betting. This card looks very interesting. A number of good betting opportunities here. I'm on a couple of dogs. You'll find out a couple of those momentarily. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Again, we're closing in on 3,000 followers on YouTube, which is pretty cool. Again, numbers don't bother me. I could care less either way, but again, I always appreciate when you do come out and watch and comment and all those fun things, or hit that like and subscribe button. Very cool. Either way, I just enjoy doing it. I enjoy that hearing all the positive comments. Again, if you don't agree with me, be respectful about it and straight up explain to me why you think I'm wrong or why you think another way, and back it up. I'm cool with that. No problems there. On that note, let's get to our first main card prediction. The opening fight of the night goes down in the UFC's middleweight division as Marvin Vittori, fighting out of Italy with a record of 12 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw, takes on the Brazilian Ultimate Fighter winner, 14-7-0, Cezar Mutanche Ferreira, as I said, in the middleweight division. Now, Vittori is coming up a split decision loss to the now interim champion, Israel Adesanya. I had Vittori to win that fight. I felt he had the opportunity to win it. He was very close. I think Adesanya got the nod appropriately, but still, good. He put up a good effort in that fight. He's been out over a year since that matchup, though. Now, for Ferreira, he lost a decision to Ian Heinisch. He had won 2 in a row in 5 of 6. And when you look at some of those guys he's beaten in that stretch, fairly impressive. He holds this recent submission victory over Jack Hermansson, who's ripping up the middleweight division. Karl Roberson, who's also fighting in the main card. And a decision victory over recent light heavyweight title challenger Anthony Lionheart-Smith. So some solid guys there. Now, Ferreira is 1 inch taller. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage, but he is 8 years older than Marvin. Now, Ferreira is a very talented BJJ black belt, but he has 2 major flaws. And most of you out there, if you've been following, you know what I'm talking about. He has a gas tank that tends to falter, and he has a very questionable chin. Overall, for his career, he has 4 losses by knockout, all by legitimate, brutal knockout. But his last was 7 fights ago, several years back. He took on Jorge Masvidal, the guy we just talked about, at welterweight in a very ill-attempted move down to 270 pounds. Got himself knocked out. He has, for the most part, I wouldn't say he's cleaned up his striking defense, but he's become more of a grappling-centric fighter, which he spends less time on the feet, and as a result, he has seen less and less. We haven't seen as many knockouts of late. That could come right back anytime soon. And when you look at Marvin Vittori, he has just 2 wins by KO and none in the UFC. He's very scrappy, but he really hasn't shown that overall one-punch stopping power. But again, with Ferreira's chin, we could see that pop up here. Where Vittori does do well, he's in that 40 to 70 significant strike range. And when he gets to that ceiling where he's in that 60 and above, that's where he does his best work. He's good at keeping pressure on. He just keeps his offense. He stays busy, keeps his offense flowing, and that's his best avenue to victory when he's vertical. Now, Ferreira, he's not going to want to stand with Vittori. He's going to want to take him down, go to the mat, and get to work. And when you look at Ferreira's track record in all but his debut, which was a decision win over Sergio Moraes in the Ultimate Fighter finale, another very good ground fighter, he has landed at least 2 takedowns or more, or submitted his opponent in all of his victories and ground them out from top position. Ground them out from top position with multiple takedowns, or submitted them only using 1 takedown. In his recent losses, he has landed a couple of takedowns, but he's faltered. He hasn't been able to maintain top position. He landed 5 against Heinisch, but really just fell apart in that fight. And he didn't do enough with his top control and got outworked. Now, Vettori, he's recently lost to a similar opponent to Ferreira and Antonio Carlos Jr. Brazilian, good jiu-jitsu, decent takedowns, but a questionable gas tank. They have some similarities and some serviceable striking. But you see there's a lot of similarities there. In fact, when you look at Antonio Carlos Jr., he just lost to Ian Heinisch in a very similar fashion to the way that Ferreira lost to Ian Heinisch. In that matchup, Ferreira had some success with his takedowns, but tired, and Heinisch took the fight over. Now, Vettori fought Antonio Carlos Jr. just over 2 years ago. He gave up 4 takedowns, couldn't do enough on the feet to counteract it, but he had his moments in the second half of the fight and kind of came on strong, just ran out of time. The Italian's takedown defense is solid. He can go action, but more importantly, which is very interesting, he can go offensive with his grappling. 8 of his career wins have come by submission, and including a couple of submission victories over BJJ black belts, including Alberto Uda, I believe, in the UFC, and before he came to the UFC, he got Igor Urijah as well, so not too bad. When he fought Adesanya, who has very good takedown defense, he was able to take him down on a couple of occasions. He landed 3 against Vitor Miranda, who's a very good striker, is known for decent counter wrestling. I don't expect to see him shooting early on against Ferreira here. but we could see him go to that grinding top game once the Brazilian gets tired, once the Brazilian opts to go to his back and starts to wear down, and Vettori feels safe in his guard. If Ferreira can land takedowns, he certainly could grind a decision victory, possibly even working a submission, but his gas tank is such a major concern. It's become such a point of contention that it's very difficult to back him in most fights. Vettori, as far as career paths are concerned and where their development is, Vettori's in a much better spot. He's improving, he's adding aspects to his game. Of course, he's younger, so he's in a better spot. Ferreira's kind of set in his ways. You're not going to see Ferreira throw a lot of new stuff at him. In fact, he's reverted a little bit, going back to his grappling, becoming more of a grappling-oriented fighter, which has worked for him, but I would say he's peaked and now is starting to flounder and start to struggle a little bit, especially as he faces younger, hungrier guys. Look for Vettori to pressure him early. He's going to have to fend off multiple takedown attempts, possibly survive on his back at points during round 1. But once Ferreira starts to fade, Vettori's going to take over in rounds 2 and 3 and be more active with his offense, more successful with takedown defense. And as I said, he might even go offensive with his top game and score some top control, especially in that third round. And of course, I say this, and there have been fights where it's like, the guy you're backing doesn't get it rolling to the third round in a manner you were expecting in the second round. That's what we could see here if Ferreira can get it going 2 rounds. But I think Vettori's in a good spot here. I think he grinds it out and takes control of this matchup. And while he could get a stoppage, my prediction is Marvin Vittori to defeat Cezar and Ferreira by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card transpires in the UFC's middleweight division as Baby K Karl Roberson, with a current mixed martial arts record of 7-2, takes on the debuting Wellington Turman, holding a very respectable record of 15 wins and 2 losses. Now, Turman is replacing John Phillips on roughly 1 month's notice. He's coming off a win over former UFC middleweight Mauricio Alexandra. I can't say that properly. Alexandra, I can't say. He fought in the UFC at one point in time, had a couple decent fights, but ultimately got the boot. He beat him at middleweight. Roberson is coming off a short notice loss to Glover Teixeira, where he moved up to light heavyweight to take the bout. He is 2-2 in the UFC overall. Now, looking at Baby K first, he's 1 inch taller than Turman, but Turman is the younger man by 6 years. Now, you look at Wellington first. He has 4 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission. He's 4-2 in the scorecards. 8 of his 11 victories have come in the first round. 8 of his 11 finished victories come in the first round. He does have some decent longer fight experience, and his last 3 opponents are combined 36-18. His third last opponent's 99. The other 2 guys have solid records, so he's not, at least recently, hasn't been just crushing cans. Now, Turman didn't throw a lot of striking in the footage I saw. He's thrown some technique, but ultimately he's looking to close the gap, and as his record would indicate, set up some kind of control. He really likes that body lock takedown situation. Clinch, body lock, look for a leg trip, and then he'll either do one or 2 things. If he gets you down, he might attack your neck, especially if you try and transition and go for a takedown on him. Or he's got a pretty good transition to the back control where he'll set up a rear naked choke and try and grind you out from that position if he can't submit you. But again, the majority of his offense is predicated around him closing the gap, clinching, and working towards getting the fight to the ground. Now, I have seen him in some fights, especially after the initial takedowns take a little bit out of him, start to have some issues, start to have some problems where his takedowns get stuffed, and he starts to go to his back. And while he will attack off his back, he's less effective. And when you're less effective fighting off your back, you are losing the fight. Now, Roberson, the interesting thing with him is that in the first matchup against John Phillips, he would have had a drastic... They're both striking-based fighters, but Roberson would have had a drastically significant, very significant, still say, grappling advantage where he would probably want to take the fight. In this fight, I don't know if that's not the case here. He is a good striker. He's got decent power. He's got a solid kicking arsenal. But sometimes he struggles to blend his offense together. As I mentioned, he's either going to be a grappler or he's going to be a striker. It seems like it's one or the other, but he doesn't flow between the two and really work that complete mixed martial arts game. He's got a little bit of muscle on him, and he has had issues pushing himself deeper in fights, and he will start to slow down at times. Now, the interesting thing is Karl has found more success, as I previously mentioned, with his grappling in the UFC. When he took on Jack Marshman, he beat him with takedowns. When he took on Stewart, he submitted him. He got him to the ground and submitted him. He's been a guy, and he's got more submissions overall. Now, I will say against Marshman, he hurt his leg and started to rely on takedowns to grind out and avoid dealing with the injury and ground out the second half of that fight for a decision, which was great. I had him by decision in that fight, which paid fairly well. Now, he is 3-2 overall in fights that end by submission, which tells us that he's also vulnerable on the mat. When he fought the aforementioned Cezar Ferreira, who we just talked about, Ferreira took him down and dominated him, submitted him. Glover Teixeira, same thing. I had Glover in that fight, loved it all day. It was one of my gold plays. Again, my heart jumped into my throat when Glover got hurt initially with those elbows that Roberson was dropping. but Glover took him down and submitted him. Roberson, he seems to either be in good shape if he's the better grappler, or completely lost if he's not, if the fight hits the ground. He's either dominant or he's dominated, one or the other. One area of concern, though, if you are a fighter trying to take him down, again, some people refer to them as elbows, whatever you want to call it. We saw it with Travis Brown initially, I think it was Josh Barnett. Again, a fighter that tries to take him down, if they get stalled out in that position, this is how he nearly stopped Glover, he starts landing those big elbows, gets that wide base, those big legs spread out along the cage, and starts dropping elbows, is pinpoint accurate with them, and can put you down or hurt you significantly and turn the fight in his favor. That's certainly a concern for a guy like Wellington, who's not, he's a decent grappler, but he's not the type of guy who's going to bowl you over with a solid double leg. Turman seems to have success early in fights, is what I've noted, but if you can defend or survive those early ground exchanges, he can get himself in trouble. He starts to slow down. And again, UFC debut, only a month to prepare. There are some issues there. Look for Roberson to do just that. Look for him to start having success with the striking. Get Turman to maybe take some shots, defend them. Avoid any bad positions. Glover Teixeira dominated him on the ground. Again, a light heavyweight. Cezar Ferreira, a very good ground fighter, dominated him on the ground. I'm not sure if Turman's going to be able to do that. If he does get him down, gets in a good position, he could finish him. But I also have major concerns with Turman's willingness to go to his back, and if a guy like Karl Roberson gets on top of you, he's going to rack up some time. He's going to control some time. So I see Roberson being the better striker, and again, he could, as the fight progresses, start to have some success on the mat. This is a close fight. My prediction, though, is Karl Roberson to defeat Wellington Turman by decision. We have a couple of fighters here trying to make that next step in the UFC's featherweight division as the 10th ranked Josh Emmett, 14-2-0, takes on the 12th ranked Mirsad Bektic with a current record of 13 wins and 1 loss. Now, Emmett is coming off of a win over Michael Johnson. I incorrectly predicted Michael Johnson. Emmett KO'd him in the third round. It was a very close fight. It could have gone either way. I don't know who the judges had scoring. I didn't look into that. But Emmett finished him in the late stages of the third round. One fight prior, he lost via brutal knockout against Jeremy Stephens, a fight that he nearly finished by knockout. And had he done that, he would have been really progressing up the ranks in the division since coming down from lightweight. For Bektic, he's coming off a split decision victory over Ricardo Lamas, which was a big fight for him to come out on top of. He had a TKO win over Godofredo Pepe one fight earlier. His only career loss was against Darren Elkins, where he dominated the entire fight and then got knocked out by Elkins in the final stages of the third round. Physically, Bektic is 2 inches taller, though at the same reach. Mirsad is the younger man by 6 years. Now, Bektic was and still is, a blue chip, fantastic prospect at 145 pounds, but we have recently seen some guys pass him by. Guys like Magomed Sharapov and Alexander Volkanovski, they have passed him by, are now on the cusp of contention, and Bektic is just a step behind. He's still fighting these fights, looking for that next opportunity to rise up and take on the big names. And when you look at these two guys' records, you look at MMA math, Emmett brutally knocked out Ricardo Lamas. Bektic eked out a split decision, so that would suggest Emmett all day, right? So we're done with this. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Styles make fights, after all. Emmett throws hard hooks. He steps in with his offense. Sometimes he's not economical. Sometimes it tends to be, it's like, okay, we're going to stock, and then unload with something big, and if it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And he can be outworked in a sense when he does that. Not a lot of setup at times in his variety. Lacks a little bit. He can counter-strike, and we've seen him score some knockouts, and that's, I believe he knocked out Lamas with a counter-strike, which landed effectively. He's willing to step in and swing, which can be very effective. He's counting on his chin. Jeremy Stephens put him down, but a lot of times Jeremy Stephens would knock out most people if he catches them that flush. Emmett can wrestle. And it seems like the one fight's been an aberration amongst all of his matchups was against Scott Holtzman at lightweight, where he landed 8 takedowns, gave up 3. So he gave up more takedowns than any of that fight. He landed significantly more than he's ever landed. It's not a key aspect of his offense, or at least it hasn't been for the majority of his victories or fights at all. Hasn't wrestled that much since either. So he could change gears here if he wants to try and throw a curveball at Bektic, but I'm not sure. Now, the key to the majority of Bektic's success has been his wrestling. He has landed at least 2 takedowns per fight, with the exception of knocking out Godofredo Pepe. Versus Lamas, he fought that matchup at close range, predominantly looking for takedowns, transitioning between takedowns and striking in the clinch. He fought very close range in that fight, trying to control him. Didn't have a lot of success. He actually had a lot of trouble getting Lamas down. I think he only took him down twice, but not a lot of regularity, not a lot of consistency. He slowed a little bit in that matchup, and his offense just wasn't that successful, but it was enough to earn the victory. when you look at this matchup, Emmett is fighting at home in California. He's a Team Alpha Male product. He's going to be jacked. He's talked about in social media how much he wants to be here. He's talked about how excited he is to be on the card, how much he wanted to have that opportunity. So he's going to be absolutely amped. Sometimes that can have a negative impact and guys come out and fight very poorly or don't fight well. Other times it wills them through the matchup and they emerge victorious. As far as what I've seen out of these two guys, Bektic's range striking just hasn't developed the way I expected it to. It's just not where it is. And the combination of Emmett's not a world-class striker either. He's not a guy who's going to go up and put on a clinic, but he's better. He's more effective, and he's more dangerous in that position. Emmett is also hard to take down. And if Bektic gets stalled, you got to watch for this scenario. If Bektic shoots in, can't take him down, he gets stalled into the clinch. When Bektic and Emmett break, I just combine them together like... Bektic, that's not right. But when they break, look for Emmett to be swinging on that break and to punish him and to try and clip him. Bektic's chin is absolutely crackable. Elkin's knocked him out, which was a combination of exhaustion and, again, maybe Bektic's chin is not as good as everyone expects it to be. And because he's been able to dominate his opponent so effectively with his wrestling, we haven't really seen it tested. But look for Emmett to land big shots on the break, in the clinch, and even at range, and start to have more and more success as the fight grinds forward. Emmett's going to defend some takedowns, win the striking battle, and I think he's going to catch him. And my prediction is Josh Emmett to defeat Mirsad Bektic by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's bantamweight division as the California kid, Urijah Faber, returns to action. 34 wins and 10 losses, former WEC featherweight champion and UFC title challenger, to take on the 15th ranked Ricky Simón with a current record of 11 wins and 1 defeat. Now, Faber is ending his retirement after a 31-month hiatus. He's fighting at home in California, where he is 4-1 inside the octagon. His last fight was a victory over Brad Pickett, and it was initially his retirement fight. He lost to Jimmy Rivera and Dominic Cruz in the fights prior to that. For Ricky Simón, he's 3-0 in the UFC, coming off a very solid win under the radar victory for Hani Yahya. He also beat Montel Jackson, who's looked very good, and Marvin Vittori as well, picking up a victory in his debut. Very controversial but interesting fashion. He's won 8 in a row, hasn't lost since 2016, basically when Faber last fought. Now, Simón has been good. He's an active striker, decent pop in his hands, and very quick overall. Faber showed himself in his prime to be a capable striker, very creative, very quick, utilizes his speed very well, but it's also the area he got himself into a lot of trouble when he started facing next-level competition, when he started to trend downwards as his age started to get the better of him. He has some power, but ultimately the way he paired up with a lot of guys, he couldn't match their pace, volume, and speed. It just was too much. One of the keys to Faber finding success on the feet, again, was being faster. If he could outquick his opponent, again, when he likes to burst in and attack in bunches and kind of wait on the outside, if he can beat them in the punch routine, that's how he wins. If he can be more creative, that's how he wins. Once that stopped being a thing, once he started to find areas where he was struggling with, that's where we saw the big downhill turn. He went from that guy who only lost against champions, basically, to losing a couple other fights along the way, just not looking nearly as good, even in victory. Now, Simón is definitely the faster fighter, and I would say he works at a greater pace here. He offers a similar offensive attack to what Jimmy Rivera beat Faber with that high pace, high pressure, constant offense, mixing in some wrestling if necessary, defending takedowns if necessary, and I think that's certainly what needs to be looked at here. And this fight, though, will most likely come down to wrestling takedowns, either their influence or their absence of. If Faber can score takedowns, he can certainly change the complexion of the fight in favor of him possibly score a finish. He has landed 21 takedowns over his last 7 victories, 4 of which have come by submission. He's got an excellent back take rear naked choke. We also know about the guillotine choke that alpha male guys are known for, and we'll see if this time away maybe reinvigorates him a little bit and allows him to set up that grappling. If he can't land takedowns, he can't do enough to counterbalance his opponent's offense with his striking alone in most situations. Now, for Ricky, he was taken down 6 times. He was taken down 6 times by... sorry, it's a little interruption there. Marvin Vittori took him down 6 times in his debut. But he's dominated the takedown battle since 11-2 in the next 2 fights, so he's shown some decent progress. He completely shut out Hani Yahya's ground game, stopping all 9 takedown attempts. And, that raises the question, will Faber be able to find any level of success against a guy like Ricky Simón, who's very quick and very agile? Faber is 40 years old, which is shocking. He's been out of the game for a long time. I'm sure the UFC would consider giving him a favorable matchup on his home return. This is a bit of a head striker. I think Simon's a tough matchup for him, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm not sure who else you throw him in there that doesn't become way too obvious and seem like too much of a mismatch. But again, Faber probably asked for a tough fight as well, so we'll see. Faber, again, he was trending down before he left, and Simone represents a lot of the issues that he was struggling with that ultimately led to him leaving the game. I think the way this fight plays out, Simone outworks him, start to finish, defends takedowns, wins the striking battle, and my prediction is Ricky Simone to defeat Urijah Faber by decision. And finally, we move to the main event of the evening in the UFC's women's bantamweight division in a bout that will most likely determine the next title challenger for the reigning greatest of all-time female fighter, Amanda Nunes. In one corner, we have the former UFC featherweight champion, very brief UFC featherweight champion, the Iron Lady, Germaine Randamie, with number 1 ranked in the division with a record of 8 wins and 3 losses. She's taking on the number 4 ranked, undefeated Aspen Ladd. Now, looking at Randamie first, she could be the next established big name against Nunes. She's won 4 in a row. This will be her 5th consecutive victory. She's beaten recent title challengers Raquel Pennington and Holly Holm, and her last loss, 2013, against Amanda Nunes. And again, it would make sense if they don't go with the 145-pound rematch between Cyborg and Nunes. I think they'll go with that one next, and then Randamie could get the next opportunity. Now, Ladd, she's trying to be the next big thing at bantamweight, and very well could be. She's undefeated. She's 3-0 in the UFC. Her entire career has been fought either inside the octagon or Invicta. She has 2 TKO finishes against former Invicta champion Tanya Evinger, fighting in the UFC, and Lena Landsberg. Now, GDR is 3 inches taller. She'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, but Ladd is the younger girl by 11 years. It's also worth noting that Randamie has only fought once a year since 2015 and nothing in 2014, so she's been very inactive, and again, we'll see how things get moving. She's been a very interesting cat. A lot of people felt she cheated and shouldn't have won the match against Holly Holm. I had Randamie in that matchup, so it didn't shock me much. Then when she gave up the title to avoid Cyborg, that certainly irked some fans. Then she pulled out of a co-main event, I believe, in her home country. That didn't help the UFC. So she's had some questionable fights. I'm shocked she's actually getting a main event here, but I'm cool with it. Now, Randamie is a fantastic striker. She has good punching power, sound technique. She's patient. She can counter-strike. And if you have holes in your striking game, she will find them, she will exploit them, and she will beat you. But the key indicator of her success is ultimately her takedown defense. Her last 3 opponents are a combined 0 for 22 on takedowns. None of them have been top-level wrestlers, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it shows that the fighters want to exploit that. They don't want to stand and bang with her. Even somebody like Holly Holm doesn't want to stand and bang with her. Conversely, Nunes went 1 for 3 in takedowns, finished her with ground and pound. Way back in the Strikeforce days, Julia Budd, who's another Bellator featherweight champion, I believe, landed 6 takedowns and won a decision. Even Julie Kedzie, in their debut in the UFC, scored a pair of takedowns and pushed Germaine to a split decision, with Germaine getting the nod in that one. But again, you see how the complexion of the fight changes significantly when their opponent is able to get her wrestling involved. Now, when you look at Ladd's track record, she secured a trio of takedowns against Ciara Eubanks in that matchup. She landed 1 against Lena Landsberg, finished her on the mat. She didn't land any officially against Tanya Evinger, but she ultimately got her to the ground and finished her as well. And that's kind of where she's had a lot of success. So the big question is, can she take Germaine down? Pennington ate an early power punch in that fight. Again, I had Germaine in that matchup, really loved how it was set to play out. Pennington was coming off the title fight loss, so we know about that scenario there. But Pennington ate an early shot in that fight, and she immediately clinched up, tied up, and started looking for takedowns. That shows how powerful Randamie is, because Pennington's a tough cat. She gets in there, and she will trade with a lot of people. She went 5 rounds with Nunes blasting her, and Germaine cracked her once, and it was immediately clinch, 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 clinch. Germaine did an excellent job defending the takedown in the clinch. She overpowered her and started landing brutal strikes, knees, elbows, was framing and backing up just a bit and landing big punches on the inside, which was very effective and really busted up Pennington in that matchup. And once that offense starts to land, your willingness to close the gap and suffer more damage starts to drop off. Now, Eubanks had a lot of success being very physical with Ladd in the first round. And remember, Eubanks is coming up to 125 pounds, has fought at 135 before, but she's not a big girl at 135 pounds. Where for Germaine, she fought at 145 in previous fights, even before the UFC has come back. And she's much bigger, and she's very strong in the clinch. But Eubanks had a lot of success in the clinch. And the area that Sarge got herself in trouble with against Aspen is that she didn't break the grappling exchanges and eventually got put in some bad spots. Ladd wasn't necessarily dominating them and wasn't setting them up very effectively, but Eubanks just kept getting drawn in and even had some success of her own, but then got put in some bad spots and lost the fight as a result. When you look at that matchup, though, Aspen ate a lot of big shots. I think she got outlanded. I think Eubanks landed almost 77 significant strikes in that fight. I think that's the number that stands out to me, more than what Aspen landed. And when you go back to the Landsberg fight, Landsberg landed more as well. And Aspen pushes forward, wants to keep that pressure on, but is willing to eat offense. And against Germaine Randamie, that's a huge mistake. And Aspen, again, if you get tied up in the clinch, she's going to struggle in that position. A lot of people are saying, Aspen's going to grind her into the cage, take her down, and beat her up. Quite possibly could happen, but it's not that simple. It's not going to go that easily as far as I'm concerned. If it does, all the power to her, and that puts her in a great position, but I don't anticipate it going that well. Ladd can get away with that type of approach against a novice striker. Come in, just simply not face first, but you know what I'm saying. Come in wary of what they're throwing, but almost disregarding it and looking to close the distance and take her down. Ladd could break Germaine. She could get Germaine to the ground and submit her. Absolutely. She could break her with 2 to 3 rounds of just constant pressure, and Germaine just folds up and can't continue, or can't put up enough offense, loses the decision, or gets finished. But her style of approach to getting to those spots, she's going to eat a lot of shots, and against a capable, powerful striker like Germaine, that's going to be too much for her to deal with. JDR, she's going to be very strong in the clinch. She's a big girl. She's got that reach at range. It's a whole bunch. I just wasn't impressed with Ladd against Eubanks. I felt she had made some progress since the last time she fought Eubanks, and it wasn't there. She clinched, and she just tried to out-muscle her. And when you start trying to out-muscle girls, it's the higher level competition, it's just not going to be there. And against Germaine, she's going to punish you for using that poor technique and that poor approach. Again, Germaine will have to be strong in the clinch. She'll have to utilize all of her tools. She'll have to take advantage of every opportunity she gets to punish Ladd, and she can't get taken down. And if she gets taken down, she's got to get up quick. That could be difficult. I think GDR puts together a sound defensive front and transitions from there to a successful offensive front. She might have to survive that first round. Deal with some of the pressure, do some damage, and then incrementally start taking the fight over in rounds 2, 3, and then where she's just full-blown going for it, or possibly finishing her. And I actually think she could finish her. My prediction is Germaine de Randamie to defeat Aspen Ladd by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 155. As per usual, all of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Again, they're free. Just head over there and check them out. They're in the prediction section. You'll see it in one of the sliders, so please check them out. Again, a lot of people have asked me immediately, what do you think on this fight? You have to give me some time. I know other sites and other predictors get their predictions out for all of the fights earlier in the week than I do. I try and have my main card predictions out between Tuesday, Wednesday, and then between Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Friday morning, I work on my preliminary predictions, passing over and eventually going to my bet packs. I like to put as much time in as I possibly can. I think you can agree with me in this situation. If you want to get your bets in, you got to get them on the time frame you want to get them in. But I think you'd prefer to have a guy who spends a little bit more time researching, looking over some things, anticipating, trying to figure out what's exactly how a fight's going to play out, than someone who rushes to get them out by Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm not saying those guys can't do a good job, and they absolutely can. It's just my style of looking at fights and my style of breaking things down requires a little bit more time. Once I get to the typing part where I'm doing the prelims, I can speed things up a little bit. Because it's just one after the next, but that's the best I can do. And again, I will do my best to get them posted. My bet packs are almost always posted by Friday night at some point. Last week is a little bit slower because it was my anniversary, so I had to take care of that business. But hey, you know what? It's fun. You guys have the predictors you like, the ones you don't like. Some people come to my show just entirely to fade me, which I get. It's all about what works for you. And we'll have to see how it plays out. I'm very much looking forward to this card. Again, it's not a highly anticipated card, and some of those are the best, because you get fun fights that are evenly matched, and you get to really put some work into the prediction part of it, and you get to see if it plays out or not. The last pay-per-view was just massive underdog after massive underdog, or favorite, I should say, where you're either... I picked up a couple nice wins. But the thing is, if you go with too many upsets, and I had a couple upsets that didn't go well, but if you go with too many upsets and you don't get them right, you look like a jackass because you're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. If you go with all favorites, you get chirped for being a guy who's a cherry picker. So you got to find that happy balance. But on a card like this, you can really have a lot of success, and really, they're so evenly matched in a lot of cases. You can break it down and you just go with who you think is going to win, and sometimes you don't even pay attention to the odds till after the fact. Either way, I very much enjoy doing this stuff. It's still a lot of fun for me. I'm hoping to, I had a decent stretch. Again, looking at my record recently, I haven't had a massive, great 12-1 or 11-2 or 12-0 night in a while. Again, those are hard to come by, especially in this day and age when the UFC is becoming so difficult to predict. But again, my recent track record has been pretty solid. I've slowly turned things around from a bit of a slow start to 2019 where things were not playing out. When you look at my 8-4, 8-4, 8-3, 8-5, I did have a 6-6, 9-4, 7-5, 9-3, 9-4, 8-3. You get the point. I'm winning almost 2 of every 3 fights, and that's a lot of people would like to see you win more than that. But again, when you've been in the prediction game as long as I have, you recognize that hey, anything over 60% is a bonus. And some guys can go well higher than that, but it's because they're not predicting every single fight. Or they're only predicting a handful of fights. Sometimes, like when you look at my 2019 run, I went 64% over, what is that, not quite 450 fights basically. I went 64%. That's pretty solid. Back in 2013, I was 66% over not quite 400 fights. So hey, it is what it is. We'll keep plugging away. If you're a fan, that's fantastic. If not, all the power to you, no worries. And for now, we've got a lot of fights coming up, so enjoy your summer, and we'll talk to you back here in the not-too-distant future. Take care, guys.